On the afternoon of the 26th of December 1900, a small ship was making its way towards a remote cluster of bleak rocks, known as the Flannan Isles, in the Outer Hebrides. Captain James Harvey planned to land a replacement for one of the 3 men stationed at the Flannan Lighthouse. But as the ship neared the landing stage, Harvey was surprised to see no one there to welcome him. He blew the ship's whistle and fired a distress flare high into the sky, hoping to attract attention. There was no response.
Welcome back to the show, guys. After a week of not being able to record, I'm finally back. I wasn't able to record last week because I was moving to a different apartment, to a different city. It's basically work-related things, right? But now I'm set up, I have everything working, I think, perfectly, and I'm ready to make some more content for you guys. This week, we're going to be talking about the mysterious disappearances of the 3 lighthouse keepers from the Flannan Isles that have vanished in the year of 1900. And basically, some of you guys may have already know about this mystery because I think it's one of those super popular, big picture, like big time mysteries, if that makes any sense. I personally have been aware about this mystery for a while, and I really wanted to investigate because it always was kind of a creepy mystery, you know what I mean? It's like unsolved. But I'm feeling pretty strongly about one particular theory. But before we jump into the theories, let's just go over the case and let's look at what actually happened in the month of December of the year 1900. This lighthouse is actually on the island named Eilean Mor, which is the biggest of the 7 islands that make up the Flannan Islands. So the Flannan Islands have 7 islands in total, and they're on the northern coast of Scotland. The Isle of Eilean Mor is approximately 17.5 hectares in extent, which makes up to around 43 acres. The island is one of the 7 islets known to the locals as the 7 Hunters, and it's located around 17 miles west of the island of Lewis. With its 1,500-foot cliffs, Eilean Mor is the largest of the Flannan Isles. As I was researching, I've read about stories of disasters happening back in the day around these islands, so they were actually much feared by sailors, and apparently for very good reasons, because numerous ships had sunk on their jagged coastlines, which are often hidden by dense fog. In the aftermath of these shipwrecks, the contents and the bodies of victims have said to litter the shores of the Flannan Isles. So, it just gives us a little bit of perspective of the weather conditions surrounding these islands. The island of Eilean Mor was named after Flannan Mac Tordalbeg, who was an Irish saint who lived in the 7th century and was the son of an Irish chieftain named Turlo of Thomond. And I've googled these guys and they're actually real people, it turns out. So this guy, Flannan Mac, actually built a chapel on the island, and even in his death, he was said to regard the island of Eilean Mor as his own property. And now for centuries, shepherds used to bring sheep to the island to gaze, but they would never stay the night because they were fearful of the spirits believed to haunt the island. A sinister, watchful presence was said to reside in the island. I'm not really sure if I believe in these mysterious spirits haunting the island, but I could definitely say for certainty that it would be pretty spooky to live there on my own and to try to man the lighthouse all alone during the stormy weathers. I could definitely go insane there, I believe. And so this island of Eilean Mor is best known for the mysterious disappearance of its lighthouse keepers back in the year of 1900. The lighthouse itself is 23 meters in height, which is around 75 feet, and it was designed by David Allen Stevenson. And why I mentioned this guy, because maybe if I have any Scottish listeners, they are probably aware of the Stevenson family, because this was a lineage of great engineers that designed lighthouses in Scotland. This lighthouse was ordered to be constructed by the Northern Lighthouse Board, otherwise known as NLB, and construction occurred between the years of 1895 and 1899, so 4 years in total. It was constructed by George Lawson of Rutherglen at a cost of £1,899, inclusive of the building of the landing places, stairs, and railway tracks. All of the materials used had to be moved up to the 45-meter cliffs directly for supply boats. A further 3,526 pounds was spent on the shore station at Breslet on the Isle of Lewis. It was first lit on the 7th of December 1899. These prices are definitely interesting, you know what I mean? And it gives us a better picture of how inflation changed the valuation of our currencies, because nowadays for £1,899 you could probably get like an electric scooter or something like that. You couldn't construct a lighthouse. So the purpose of the railway tracks that were also constructed were to transport provisions for the keepers and paraffin fuel for the light of the lighthouse itself. The lighthouse itself burned 20 barrels of paraffin per year, and these had to be carried up the steep gradients from the landing places using a cable-hauled railway. This was powered by a small steam engine in a shed next to the lighthouse. The frequently appalling weather and rough seas around the Flannans had considerably delayed construction, which had taken 4 years instead of the expected 2 years. Let's make a note here that the mysterious disappearances happened sometime exactly a year after the lighthouse went into operation. The first time it was realized that something was not right at the island, something abnormal was happening, was actually on the 15th of December in the year of 1900, when around the midnight a steamer, which is a steamer ship called SS Archer, on a passage from Philadelphia to Leith, basically from America to Scotland, noted in its log that the light of this Flannan Isle lighthouse was not operational, and the weather conditions were very poor, and under these weather conditions it was expected for this lighthouse to shine light and help passing ships guide their way to the shores. Subsequent investigations later on showed that the lighthouse itself was not seen even with the assistance of a powerful telescope between the 7th and the 29th of December. This telescope was on mainland Scotland and it was directed to the lighthouse. Now, we can't really claim that the lighthouse has not been in operation from the 7th to the 29th, because it was also reported that this telescope would not be able to pick up the lighthouse even if it was operational during poor weather conditions. So it's assumed that we cannot really gauge when exactly the lighthouse became non-operational from this telescope that was situated somewhere on mainland Scotland. I wasn't able to verify exactly at which location it was. It was probably pretty close to the Flannan Isles, or at least like to the closest point on the mainland, the northern mainland of Scotland, to the Flannan Isles. When this steamer ship SS Archer docked in Leith 3 days later on 18th of December, the sighting was passed on to the Northern Lighthouse Board. The relief vessel for this lighthouse, called Hesperus, was unable to sail from Breslet, Lewis, as planned on the 20th of December because of adverse weather conditions. It did not reach the Flannan Isles until the afternoon of 26th of December, 6 days later. The lighthouse was supposed to be manned by 3 men: principal keeper James Ducat, who was 43 years of age, Thomas Marshall, who was 40 years of age, and Donald MacArthur, who was 28, and he was the occasional keeper, with a rotating 4th man spending time on shore. Donald MacArthur was actually the occasional keeper who was on duty in place of the regular member of staff named William Ross, who was on sick leave at that time. I've tried to find more information about these 3 men that went missing because they are essentially the main characters of this topic, right? So James Ducat had a wife and 4 children back home, so he was quite the family man. He was from the town called Arbroath and had spent 2 decades in the lighthouse service, so he was a veteran lighthouse keeper. James Ducat was selected to run the Flannan Lighthouse while the lighthouse was still under construction, and he had actually spent a total of 14 months becoming familiar with the weather conditions over the entire year. James Ducat had to be convinced to accept this post on Eilean Mor. He personally said it was too dangerous, that he had a wife and 4 children depending on him, so he deemed this post as a dangerous one. The only information I managed to find on Thomas Marshall was that he was unmarried, and there isn't a lot of information about his background. And then we have Donald MacArthur, the occasional keeper. He had a wife and 2 children. He was from Breslet. He was also a former soldier as well. When the crew of the relief boat named Hesperus reached Eilean Mor, they found out that the flag staff had no flag in it, and none of the usual provision boxes had been left on the landing stage for restocking. And even more strangely, none of the lighthouse keepers were there to welcome them ashore. Jim Harvey, who was the captain of this relief boat named Hesperus, attempted to reach the 3 men by blowing the ship's whistle and firing a flare, but both of these attempts were unsuccessful. The captain, Jim Harvey, decided that a boat should be launched, and the relief keeper, the relief lighthouse keeper, Joseph Moore, was instructed to sail towards Eilean Mor and investigate. Now, when he landed, he walked up to the lighthouse. He found the entrance gate to the compound and the main door both closed. Now, when he eventually made his way inside of the facility, he found that the beds were unmade and the clocks were unwound. Some reports state that Joseph Moore felt very weirded out when he was inside of this abandoned lighthouse. He didn't investigate any further. He immediately rushed back to the boat, to Hesperus, to report these findings. Now, upon returning to the landing stage with the grim news, he was actually instructed by Jim Harvey to go back to the lighthouse, now accompanied by 2 other seamen, only 1 seaman and another second mate of Hesperus. Their new search actually revealed that the lamps had been cleaned and refilled, as well as a set of oilskins was found. Now, oilskins is just basically this super heavy raincoat. Now, the fact that it was found inside of the lighthouse, it actually suggested that one of the keepers had left the lighthouse without them, while the other two took their oilskins with them. Relief keeper Joseph Moore and another 3 volunteer seamen were left on the island to attend the light, and Hesperus returned to Lewis. Captain Harvey sent a telegram to the North Lighthouse Board, and this telegram was dated on the same day, 26th of December. In the telegram, Captain Jim Harvey stated, quote, "A dreadful accident has happened at the Flannans. The 3 keepers, Ducat, Marshall, and the Occasional, have disappeared from the island. Fired a rocket, but, as no response was made, managed to land Moore, who went up to the station but found no keepers there. The clocks were stopped, and other signs indicated that the accident must have happened about a week ago. Poor fellows, they must been blown over the cliffs or drowned trying to secure a crane or something like that. Night coming on, we could not wait to make something as to their fate. I have left Moore, MacDonald, Boymaster, and 2 seamen on the island to keep the light burning until you make other arrangements. Will not return to Oban until I hear from you. I have repeated this wire to Muirhead in case you are not at home. I will remain at the telegraph office tonight until it closes if you wish to wire me." Back on the island, Joseph Moore and the other 3 volunteers found that everything was intact at the east landing, but the west landing provided considerable evidence of damage caused by recent storms. A box at 33 meters, which is 108 feet, above sea level had been broken and its contents strewn about. Iron railings were bent over, the iron railway by the path was wrenched out of its concrete, and the rock weighing more than a ton had been displaced. On top of the cliff at more than 60 meters, which is 200 feet above sea level, turf had been ripped away as far as 10 meters, which is 33 feet, from the cliff's edge. Now, relief keeper Joseph Moore later wrote 2 days after landing on Eileen Moore, so on the 28th of December, he wrote, "Sir, it was with deep regret I wish you to learn the very sad affair that has taken place here during the past fortnight, namely the disappearance of my 2 fellow lightkeepers, Mr. Ducat and Mr. Marshall, together with the occasional keeper, Donald MacArthur, from off this island. As you are aware, the relief was made on the 26th. That day, as on other relief days, we came to anchorage under Flannan Isles, and not seeing the lighthouse flag flying, we thought they did not perceive us coming. The steamer's horn was sounded several times, still no reply. At last, Captain Harvey deemed it prudent to lower a boat and land a man, if it was possible. I was the first to land, leaving Mr. McCormack and his men in the boat till I should return from the lighthouse. I went up, and on coming to the entrance gate, I found it closed. I made for entrance door leading to the kitchen and storeroom, found it also closed and the door inside that, but the kitchen door itself was open. On entering the kitchen, I looked at the fireplace and saw that the fire was not lightened for some days. I then entered the rooms in succession, found the beds empty, just as they left them in the early morning. I did not take time to search further, for I only too well knew something serious had occurred. I darted out and made for the landing. When I reached there, I informed Mr. McCormack that the place was deserted. He with some of the men came up second time, as so to make sure, but unfortunately the first impression was only too true. Mr. McCormack and myself proceeded to the light room where everything was in proper order, the lamp was cleaned, the fountain full, blinds on the windows, etc. We left and proceeded on board the steamer. On arrival, Captain Harvey ordered me back again to the island, accompanied with Mr. MacDonald, a Campbell, and a Lamont, who were to do duty with me till timely aid should arrive. We went ashore and proceeded up to the light room and lighted the light in the proper time that night and every night since. The following day, we traversed the island from end to end, but still nothing to be seen to convince us how it happened. Nothing appears touched at East Landing to show that they were taken from there. Ropes are all in their respective places, in the shelter, just as they were left after the relief on the 7th. On the west side, it is somewhat different. We had an old box halfway up the railway for holding West Landing mooring ropes and tackle, and it has gone. Some of the ropes, it appears, got washed out of it. They lie strewn on the rocks near the crane. The crane itself is safe. The iron railings along the passage connecting railway with footpath to landing and started from their foundation and broken in several places. And guys, this is how it's written. I'm not retarded. Also, railing round crane and handrail for making mooring rope fast for boat is entirely carried away. Now, there is nothing to give us an indication that it was there the poor men lost their lives, only that Mr. Marshall has his sea boots on and oilskins. Also, Mr. Ducat has his sea boots on. He had no oilskin, only an old waterproof coat, and that is away. Donald MacArthur has his wearing coat left behind him, which shows, as far as I know, that he went out in shirt sleeveless. He never used any other coat on previous occasions, only the one I am referring to. Alright, so on the 29th of December, which was the next day, Robert Muirhead, a Northern Lighthouse Board superintendent, arrived to conduct the official investigation into this whole situation, right? So Robert Muirhead had originally recruited all of these 3 missing men and knew them personally. He examined the clothing left behind in the lighthouse and concluded that James Ducat and Thomas Marshall had gone down to the western landing stage, while Donald MacArthur, who was the occasional, had left the lighthouse during heavy rain in his shirt sleeveless. He also noted that whomever left the light last and left it unattended actually breached the NLB rules, because you can never leave the lighthouse unattended. He also noted that some of the damage to the west landing was, quote, difficult to believe unless actually seen, end quote. This is a snippet from his report regarding this incident that he wrote a year later. From evidence which I was able to procure, I was satisfied that the men had been on duty up till dinner time on Saturday the 15th of December, that they had gone down to secure a box in which the mooring ropes, landing ropes, etc. were kept, and which was secured in a crevice in the rock about 110 feet, which is 34 meters, above sea level, and that an extra large sea had rushed up the face of the rock, had gone above them, and coming down with immense force had swept them completely away. No bodies were ever found, but there have been some mysterious sights resulting in fascinated national speculation in newspapers and periodicals of that era. Implausible stories ensued, such as that the sea serpent had carried the men away, that they had arranged for a ship to take them away and start new lives, potentially to avoid deaths, which didn't really make any sense. Also that they had been abducted by foreign spies, and that they had met their fate through the malevolent presence of a boat filled with ghosts. I think this is in reference to Phantom of the Seven Hunters, which is a theorized ghost ship. Now, over time, a story has been developed of the existence of unusual logbook entries. They supposedly have Thomas Marshall saying on the 12th of December that there were severe winds, the likes of which I have never seen before in 20 years. He also is said to have reported that James Ducat had been very quiet and that Donald MacArthur had actually been crying. Now, Donald MacArthur was a veteran mariner with a reputation for brawling, and thus it would be strange for him to be crying in response to a storm. Log entries on the 13th of December were said to have stated that the storm was still raging on and that all three men had been praying to God. This was also very puzzling, as all three men were experienced lighthouse keepers who knew they were in a secure structure 150 feet above sea level and should have known they were safe inside. Furthermore, there had been no reported storms in the area on the 12th, 13th, and 14th of December in actuality, so these logbooks were phony. And the final log entry is said to have been made on the 15th of December, stating, "Storm ended, sea calm, God is overall." Now, a subsequent investigation by Mike Dash for the 14 times revealed that the logbooks were fictional, later additions to the story. And I've actually read this report by Mike Dash. It's actually an amazing read, and you can find it online. And I highly suggest just reading about it. It's like a really nice read in the evening, I would say. You know what I mean, guys? Subsequent researchers have taken into account the geography of the island to potentially explain the disappearance of the three men. The coastline of Eilean Mor is deeply indented with narrow gulls called goes, whatever, right? The west landing, which is situated in such a geo, terminates in a cave, and I think we can see the cave from some of the pictures that we can find online of Eilean Mor. Now, in the high seas or storms, water would rush into the cave and then explode out again with considerable force, you know what I mean? I think you can picture how it should look inside of your heads. It was possible that Donald MacArthur may have seen a series of large waves approaching the island and, knowing the likely danger to his colleagues, ran down to warn them, and only to be washed away as well in the violent swell. Recent research in a book written by author James Love actually discovered that Thomas Marshall was previously fined 5 shillings when his equipment was washed away during a huge gale. It is likely in seeking to avoid another fine that he and James Ducat tried to secure their equipment during a storm and were swept away as a result. The fate of Donald MacArthur, although required to stay behind to man the lighthouse according to the NLB rules, can also be guessed to be the same. James Love, the author himself, speculates that Donald MacArthur probably rushed out of the lighthouse in order to warn or help his colleagues, and was swept away into the sea as well. This storm-related theory actually explains why the, one set of oilskins remained indoors and that Donald MacArthur's code remained on its peg, but it does not explain why the doors was properly closed, right? Because imagine if Donald MacArthur is rushing out of the lighthouse to warn his colleagues, he would probably not close the door properly. Surely he wouldn't close the door properly if he already made the conscious decision to leave his oilskins behind. It wouldn't make sense to leave your oilskins but make sure the door is closed. You would much rather get the oilskins. You don't even care about the doors at this point. Another very similar theory is based on the first-hand experiences of a man named Walter Aldebert, who was a keeper on the Flannan Islands for 4 years, from year 1953 to 1957. Now, he personally believes that one man may have been washed into the sea, but then his companions, who were trying to rescue him, were washed away by more rogue waves. And I mean, we kind of have to go with this guy, right? Because he kind of lived there for 4 years. We haven't even been there. And then we have a set of different but very similar exotic theories that one of the men may have went insane, killed the other 2 guys, and then committed suicide himself, or, a similar scenario to such. It was mostly speculated that Donald MacArthur, who was the occasional, he was the youngest of them all, he was 28, had a wife and 2 children, actually was a very volatile character. This may have led to a fight breaking out near the cliff edge by the West Landing that caused all 3 men to fall to their death, but I found no proof of Donald MacArthur's violent behavior, and I kinda believe that this may have been fabricated. Okay, so what happened to the 3 men that went missing sometime in middle of December in the year of 1900 from the Eileen Moore's Lighthouse? Let's look at the facts in this case. So when I was researching the case, and when you go over like different articles online, they kind of have like bits and pieces from one big article. They will extract like a little piece, and it will not make any sense without any context. So I kind of had to actually go and read a bunch of like these actual witness reports. You can actually find them on the NLB's website. I'll leave the NLB's website and the link where you can actually read up on these documents in the not in the comment section, in the description on the YouTube channel, and you can actually find it. And I was pretty certain when I put all of these documents in my head, right, that actually the man must have disappeared sometime in the afternoon of December 15th. Now, why this is because there was an actual logbook in the lighthouse. Now, I'm not talking about the phony logs about like some of them crying and the crazy storm happening. That's like all phony stuff that was like created by an American publication back in, I think, the first half of the 20th century, sometime in the 20s, I believe. So this real logbook, not phony logbook, real logbook from the lighthouse actually contained wind, pressure, and temperature readings that were taken, they were taken, throughout December, and they were, the last entry was actually taken at 9 a.m. on the 15th of December. So we know someone was writing the logs on the 15th. And I'm pretty sure it was some of the men who were stationed there, one of the 3 guys. Definitely not an outsider, in my opinion. And let's remember that this is the same day, the 15th, when the steamer SS Archer passed through the lighthouse at around midnight, and the light was already out. So I'll just assume that the accident must have happened sometime on the 15th, and I would say that it probably happened sometime in the afternoon on the 15th. In addition to this, the captain of the relief boat Hesperus, Jim Harvey, actually stated on the 26th of December that the clocks were stopped and other signs indicated that an accident must have happened about a week ago. So the disappearance couldn't have happened sometime in the beginning of December. This is another reason why I'm leaning towards that something must have happened on the 15th. When the relief lighthouse keeper Joseph Moore went to investigate the lighthouse on the 26th of December, he found that the entrance gate to the compound and the main door were closed, the beds were unmade, and the clocks had stopped working. All maintenance work for the day of December 15th had been completed already, the pots and pans had been cleaned, and the kitchen tidied up, which showed that the man who was acting as a cook had completed his work as well. This goes to prove that the man must have disappeared in the afternoon because all the work was already completed. So we know they didn't disappear in the morning because you would still need to do a lot of work to complete everything. So you probably couldn't disappear at 10 a.m. because you need to prepare everything. And I believe they ate lunch and then cleaned after lunch. So it had to have been in the afternoon. On the 26th of December, Joseph Moore and the other two sailors left to man the lighthouse found that the west landing had damage caused by recent storms. And then 3 days later, on the 29th of December, Superintendent from the NLB, Robert Muirhead, arrived on Eilean Mor. He actually examined the clothing left behind in the lighthouse and concluded that James Ducat and Thomas Marshall had gone down to the western landing stage, and that Donald MacArthur had left the lighthouse during heavy rains in his shirt sleeveless. He also concluded that all three men must have gone down to secure a box in which the mooring ropes were kept at the west landing, and then subsequently a large wave swept them away into the sea. Also, if you go to the NLB's website and you read up on Robert Muirhead's report, he actually stated that when the accident occurred, Ducat was wearing sea boots and a waterproof, and Marshall was wearing sea boots and an oilskin. And as Moore assures me, Joseph Moore assured Robert Muirhead that the men only wore those articles of clothing when going down to the landings. They must have intended, when they left the station, to either go down to the landing or a close proximity of it. That's the only reason why they would wear those clothes, to be close to those dangerous areas of the island. And also, author James Love found that Thomas Marshall was previously fined 5 shillings when his equipment was washed away during a huge gale. Also, according to James Love's book called A Natural History of Lighthouses, lighthouse keepers back then were actually fined 5 shillings for any damage or lost equipment. Now, 5 shillings was actually 1/4 of a pound, and the average monthly salary in the UK at that time was £3.5 per month, right? So if we do the math really quickly, if 20 shilling was £1 and the average salary was £3.5, that would mean that the average monthly salary was 70 shillings, right? So losing 5 shillings out of 70 shillings in total, that's a big pay cut. It would make sense for the men to risk going into dangerous situations because it was 5 shilling, right? It was like a pretty good chunk of money, especially for a family man. He wanted to secure the money. After their disappearances, no bodies were ever discovered, and according to some reports, this is quite strange because bodies usually wash up somewhere on the island after an accident would take place, at least historically. And if you guys can remember, Walter Aldebert, the previously mentioned lighthouse keeper who served as principal keeper on Eilean Mor between 1953 and 1957, well, he was actually well aware of the vanishing of these lighthouse keepers back when he was serving as the lighthouse keeper. So he actually conducted his own research while he was there. He reportedly took a camera out in appalling weather conditions to record the height of the largest waves striking the island, exposing 30 reels of film in total. On one occasion, crouching on the shoulder of the island, some 200 feet above sea level, he himself was nearly washed off the cliff, and this is his quote: "A coil of rope lying on top and 2 solid to be shifted by the wind was washed off. The water lay a foot deep after the wave receded. My pictures do not show the highest waves, but they give some idea of their immensity. Perhaps these poor fellows, being fairly new to the Flannans, did not realize the extreme danger. And those are pretty much the details that I found during my research, and I enjoyed researching this case because I found out a lot of information about like lighthouses and traditions of lighthouse keeping and so on. But I will say that I think I have a better picture now in my head about this mystery and this case, and I'm definitely leaning towards an accident. I think the only little the only little thing that would kind of make the accident theory less believable is maybe the fact that the compound was neatly locked and closed. Well, I'm not gonna say locked. I have no idea how this compound even looks like. I looked at the pictures, I got no idea. So I'm not really sure what that means, that the compound was closed as if they left on their own accord, if you know what I mean. So maybe that's a little hit to this storm theory. But I will say that I think there are ways to explain that, you know what I mean? Let's give it some wiggle room, and I will be concluding this episode that I think most likely, in my opinion, some sort of an accident occurred. A lot of other people who went to the scene reported how dangerous the place looked and how severe the West Landing damage was. I would assume that these three men probably had an accident and they all subsequently drowned in the sea. But please leave your thoughts in the comments section. What do you guys think happened to these three men? Do you have another theory? Have I missed something? And I hope you all enjoyed this episode, and we'll catch you on the next one. Until then, please stay safe and peace out.